Hi everyone, good afternoon. This is Matt Day. Welcome to our inaugural and slightly experimental webinar. Our subject today is how to assert our value as marketing leaders. I'll talk to you a little bit more about what we're going to cover. I hope your day is going well. Out of my window, I can see a car park, and some poor person has just had a parking ticket, but is making quite a good fist of the argument with the traffic warden. So who knows? That argument might still be carrying on longer than we do. In this 30-minute webinar. So let me introduce you to Claire Marshall, who's on the call as well. Claire is going to be helping us field questions, so feel free to ask any questions or make any comments that you want to during the course of the webinar. And she's also going to be helping if any of you have problems with technical issues.
Hello, everyone. And also, thanks, Matt. If everyone could just write in that you can hear Matt well, that would be helpful in the chat box.
Brilliant, thank you. So for those of you that don't know me, and it's great to see a mix of some very familiar names together with some new names. My name's Matt Day. I run a small consultancy called Brand Ambition. I've been working in marketing or things related to marketing for about 25 years or so. On the left, you can see some of the companies that I've been lucky enough to work for. I've been consulting for around about 6 or so years now. And I guess the common theme, if I look back at what I've done, is about helping companies to achieve growth through driving marketing strategy into action, and also have quite an interest in helping marketing leaders to develop their people as well, team effectiveness. So I've worked in a variety of big and small companies, and I guess I really get the buzz from helping people to create strategy, but really to put that into action and to see some tangible business results from it. In terms of these webinars, as I say, it's highly experimental. We're going to do 3, see what the feedback's like, and then decide whether to do further ones. We are targeting at senior marketeers, often people who will be leading teams. The idea is to give you some concise, say around about 30 minutes of external stimulus. And I don't like to play a kind of expert role. I tend to observe a lot of stuff. So the content is mainly based on stuff that I've seen that I think might be helpful, and maybe at the end of it you'll get 1 or 2 things that will provoke some thoughts about how you can apply them yourself. And I guess the key thing here is to say that I want these webinars to be quite action orientated. So I sat through a lot of material myself when I was working client side, which was great, but I wasn't sure how I would apply that when I got back to the workplace. So we want to try and avoid that with these webinars. We do have 2 upcoming webinars at the end of next month and the month after. So we're going to be talking about the first one, presenting bulletproof plans to your CEO, and also how we can get the best out of agencies on our third webinar. So what we're going to cover today are 3 things. First of all, what stops marketing leaders from asserting their value? I know from talking to people in advance of these webinars that this is a subject that's quite dear to people's hearts. Secondly, what can we learn from looking at marketers that seem to do this very well? And thirdly, just some thoughts, some hacks or some tips, if you like, which you can apply tomorrow. So very practical things. So why is it so difficult sometimes to assert our value as a marketing leader? I read a book which was published last year, which I thought summed up what they called the gaps very well. So the author, Patrick Barwise, talked about there being 3 key areas of gaps which are more prevalent in marketing than perhaps they are in other functions. The first is a trust gap. As marketeers, we're talking about things that are in the future, and therefore a lot less solid and predictable than, say, finance, which is talking about things from the past. There's a power gap in the sense that as marketeers, quite often the people that we need to influence are not necessarily directly under our control, and we need to work across multiple teams in order to deliver the results that we need for the consumer. And the third is a skills gap. Marketing itself is a pretty young discipline, and it's evolving all the time, and we've seen that especially in the last few years. So we're constantly trying to learn and improve. So it's not like a set of skills that we can learn once and then apply for the rest of our career. The second reason why I think it's so difficult is around about expectations. And again, a recent article which appeared in Harvard Business Review talked about the different types of marketing director roles that exist. And it highlighted that actually there are often very, very big differences in the expectations that, say, general managers or chief execs have of their marketeers versus the person in role themselves. It talked about some marketing roles being strategically orientated. It's about planning, about brand positioning, about managing from the centre and so on. It also talked about a group of roles which were more around commercialisation, so marketing activation, more around getting stuff done, getting stuff launched, managing marketing mix within a market. And then it also talked about a third category, enterprise-wide, where there was a combination of those two elements, both strategy and also commercialization. But often there's a gap between what the chief exec expects of a marketing director and what they themselves expect to deliver, which can cause issues. And I guess the third area is to think about context. So both outside the business, but also inside. So we're seeing radical changes across lots of different landscapes in terms of consumers' needs. We're looking at big changes, and particularly within the UK in the last few weeks, massive changes in terms of the structure of channels and customers, and also a lot of our clients are facing cost pressures from currency changes, from different procurement, particularly in B2B situation, and also pressure to deliver higher returns on investment, marketing seen as an investment. And also inside the business, increasingly people are working with more matrix type organisations. They are working with quite often very complex supply chains, sometimes spanning different countries. There's a growing number of stakeholders that we as marketeers need to influence. And also, I know from my own experience, marketing is one of those weird things. It's a bit like education. We've all been to school, so we probably all have an opinion on education. We've all watched adverts. So as a result, I think a lot of people also feel like they're an expert in marketing, and that can challenge our professional position within the business. And all of this stuff, I guess, can lead to negative impacts. Obviously on us and our motivation, but also on our team, on our boss, and the wider organisations and our brand and business performance. These are some of the things that I've seen in my career, and also from talking to clients in more recent years. We can see impacts on our own motivation. I guess it's just natural. If we feel ourselves valuable, then we're probably likely to be much more motivated and have higher energy levels within our own roles. If you talk to people also, you find marketeers sometimes frustrated that they're getting excluded from the forums where real decisions happen. Quite often they reference corridor conversations and say that they have a limited influence on the direction of the business, whereas I would argue that marketing should be central to that. People also find that if they're not valued as a marketeer or that their function is not valued to the business, then their access to resources on a very practical level are reduced. People, money, and those are the things that as marketeers we need to secure in order to deliver results. People's career prospects can be limited, particularly if a marketing director is, say, looking to be promoted to chief exec. If the value of their role and their function is not perceived to be strong, then that will limit, I suspect, their opportunities for progression. Also impacts in terms of, say, team engagement. Again, if we're working within a team that feels valued, I think it's natural that we will feel motivated to put more of our energy into our roles. But also, if marketing is not valued, typically we can fall back on other drivers of growth that might be more short term, and we might find that we get into increasing levels of trade spend or promotional activity in order to kind of lap, if you like, last year's sales results. So it can actually drive things to be quite tactical and hit ultimately the bottom line. So what can we learn from leaders that do it well? And this, as I say, is really based on some observations from companies that I've worked with in the past, but also clients that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last few years. And the first thing I would highlight is about building big relationships. but with other functions, with key influencers within the business, and they needn't necessarily be the most senior people. Often people with the greatest influence are not necessarily who you might expect them to be. But I guess the key thing that I've noticed is it's about influencing the relationship before you need help from that person. And I'm reminded of a time where I was working within a company, and we were based in the UK, and we had a French factory that supplied our product, and we were a very tiny part of the overall volume coming out of the French factory. But we made a concentrated effort to work with the French manufacturing organisation, because we knew that we had a big ask coming down the line of that factory, and we needed their support. And actually, it was tremendously successful. Going, visiting, talking, building the relationship ahead of enlisting their support to drive our business. The second thing I've noticed about marketeers that seem to be very good at asserting their value is that they are physically present across the business. So they don't sit in offices all the time. They don't sort of see themselves as in an ivory tower, but they physically get around the business and talk to people in different functions, senior people, junior people, it doesn't matter. But they move about the business, and they are very, very visible within that. I guess an example of that I would highlight was the business I worked with was launching a very big and actually very different kind of innovation compared to what this business had done in the past. And again, what we tried to do was to walk the plans around the business a long time before the launch date, in order to get people engaged in what we were doing, and to flush out, I guess, also issues that might crop up as we progress the project. The third thing that I've noticed is about leaders that obsess about linking activity and operations to strategy. So very clearly saying, this is what we want to achieve as an overall business or as a group, and this is how the activity that I'm recommending fits into that. This is how it ladders up or ladders down to that strategy. The next point I've noticed is a strong understanding about how we really make money. And I was talking recently to the chief exec of one of the larger casual dining chains within the UK. And I was struck by how much emphasis this former marketeer placed on operations, and just how critical the operational running of a restaurant chain was, and how actually, without understanding that and integrating with the operations, understanding the drivers of how they make money on a day-to-day basis, his view was that marketing would become pretty irrelevant. Other thoughts, I've seen people who explain very clearly how marketing contributes. So, for example, I worked with a manufacturer in the DIY sector, and we talked there about the importance of getting people to decorate more and getting them to buy into new benefits. So we talked about consumer behaviour change that we were hoping to shift, but also the commercial impact of that. And that sentence didn't cover like the full scope of what we did as a marketing team, but it was simple enough that all of the functions within the business got it, and I think accordingly understood what we were there to do for them and for the business. I also see marketeers acting as a bridge between the customer and the business. There's one business that I work with that does a lot of work in the baby food sector, and they do a lot of work taking time to understand parents at key points during a child's development, and then they take responsibility to bring that insight back into the business and make sure that everyone, including people outside of marketing, understand what the customer is going through and how their products and services help deliver against those needs. I was working with a marketing director. We were doing some coaching, and one of the things that we put in place, or suggested, was there was a new chief exec coming in, and the client was very keen to make sure that marketing was placed centre stage under the new CEO's tenure. So we talked about the importance of living, if you like, a dual role. So you have a role as a marketing director, which is to lead a marketing function, but you're also a critical member of a board of directors. And actually, that is a really significant other part of your role. And behaving in those with those like two hats on, I think is really critical to asserting your value as a marketeer and in the wider business. And the last point I'd make is simply about being in the right place at the right time for decisions. So I've helped over the last few years a number of companies put in place processes which help the marketeers to be a part of commercial decision making. For example, with integrated business planning, where marketers are in the same room as the sales guys and are co-creating plans, and they are in the right place to help decide what the activation of those plans should be within the market. So those are the things, some of the things that I've observed strong marketing leaders seem to do that drives their value as marketeers. So let's pause for a minute. Claire, are there any questions that have come in so far?
There's one, Matt. One question is, how can you demonstrate ROI when you don't have the means to measure it?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. And something actually which is surprisingly kind of common. I guess the weird thing is we are supposed to be, with kind of digital technology, supposed to be able to kind of measure pretty much anything that moves. But it's so surprising the frequency with which this kind of question comes up. And I guess the reality is that you cannot sometimes measure everything that you would ideally like to. But sometimes you can kind of find a proxy for what you want to measure. Or you can look to other industries and kind of use rules of thumbs or examples from other industries. I used to work with a guy in confectionery business, and he was starting up a new offshoot of our confectionery business in a developing market. And it's pretty basic and rudimentary, but he actually used to count the number of our branded discarded packs in rubbish cans versus competitors. Now that's pretty basic, but what it did show is that normally where there's a will, there's a way, and you can kind of find some way of getting an approximation, even when the data doesn't necessarily exist. And you can explain to people that data doesn't exist, and therefore you're making a rule of thumb, or you're making some kind of assessment. So I hope that answers that one. Let me move swiftly on to 5 suggestions, if you like, five tips that you might want to pick up and deploy yourself. So the first is a challenge, I guess, to the audience is to say, what's your marketing elevator pitch? So, and this is not sort of great ethereal statements about the conceptual value of marketing and all that kind of good stuff. This is about how your marketing team helps the company to make more money, helps the company to sell more stuff, if you like. And I guess probably the key ingredients are something which relates to the consumer or the customer, and something relates to the commercial impact of what you do. And I guess the question to the people on the call, and indeed watching the recording after, is, do you have that view in your mind about, super simplistically, what it is that marketing delivers to your business, that anyone within the business or outside the business would instantly get? The second tip I want to suggest is around kind of formalising your plan in order to meet key influencers within the business. And it kind of sounds a bit basic, but I think it's human, kind of naturally human behaviour, that we tend to spend more time with the people that we like. And so consequently, I think writing it down and having a simple plan, which you don't need to share with anyone specifically, which says, I will meet these key people within the business, at least on this kind of a frequency. I will go and present at these meetings, or I will just check in casually with these people at these points in time. If it's written down, it forces you to do it. And actually what you can do is avoid that human bias thing where we spend more time with the people that we like, because that can actually can limit our impact if we're not influencing with everybody that we need to. The third kind of tip, which I've seen work really successfully, is to have a simple slide, perhaps even simpler than the sort of smudged out example that I've put on this slide, which you put at the start of every presentation that you give, which reminds people about what the company strategy is or what your brand strategy is, whatever's relevant. and then goes on to explain how whatever the recommendation is or the plan that you're presenting, how that fits in with the strategy that's already been agreed. And it's a dead simple thing to do, but it's quite neat in terms of if you show a strategy that's already been agreed by, say, the board or the management team, then you're getting them to kind of instantly start nodding as soon as you present. And I think accordingly, whatever you're proposing is more likely to get adopted and receive a more positive kind of impact. And what it does is it constantly, just by kind of repeating this every time, it reinforces that what you're doing as marketeers is driving the strategy of the company. And that's a really important idea to plant and to continue to kind of nurture over the time if you want marketing to be valued within your business. The fourth tip that I wanted to put across was around building in quick wins and celebrating these publicly. And I myself have been very guilty of underestimating the importance of building in quick wins and about talking about those within the business. If I'm honest with you, I think in the past I kind of thought that this was perhaps a waste of time and a little bit frivolous, a little bit self-indulgent. But I've certainly seen that it can be really effective. And I'm reminded of an example where, again, we were doing some work with a company and we were building a new manufacturing capability. And actually providing the sales team with pictures of the manufacturing plant as it was developed was a great way, even though we actually hadn't produced a product at all and were months away from it, was a great way of saying, look, stuff is happening, we're making progress, let's celebrate the fact that we've achieved a milestone. I noticed in an HBR article recently that they'd done a study of the impact of small wins on people, and there is actually a kind of scientific rationale for why quick wins are good. Apparently, they kind of boost people's dopamine levels. So in a sense, there's a sort of chemical reason. If you have a quick win at work, your dopamine levels are enhanced, and in a sense, you become kind of a little bit addicted to progress. So you love the feeling that comes with small successes. So it can definitely drive, I think, commitment of teams and help enhance the value of marketing and the contribution that we make. And then the fifth and final suggestion is about rehearsing negotiations on expectations. So you remember at the start of the webinar, we talked about the expectations as being one key area of gap, if you like, often between a marketeer and the people that they work for or work with. I think if like so many people, you kind of experience the chief exec saying, like, I want my cake and eat it. So I want the size of launch that you promised, but I want it delivered on, say, half the budget that we originally talked about. One thing you can do is to rehearse on those negotiations and be clear about the trade-offs that you have to make. The sort of give-get, if you like, of negotiation. And I often feel that marketeers are a little bit disadvantaged because this is a sort of sales training, or sort of training that salespeople get by default, but we don't necessarily get it as marketeers. So setting clear expectations, and then if you're asked to work with a lower budget, being clear about what the trade-offs are that are associated with that. And of course, setting a realistic target but aiming to over-deliver, so you'll get a reputation as somebody that hits target or achieves, helps reinforce your credentials as a deliverer, if you like, within the business. So, okay, far away.
Sure. So one question is, they say my general manager is a marketer. Do you have thoughts on how I can get him to, or how I can stop him getting over involved with my areas of responsibility?
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I know that a lot of marketing managers and directors probably would prefer it if their boss kind of came from an entirely different function. So I do empathise with that. I guess it kind of comes back to the expectations bit and the role of honest conversations, perhaps, and getting your boss to acknowledge that they may have come from a marketing background, but it sounds like they've now stepped into more of a general manager kind of a role. So they will need to operate across multiple functions. I guess have an honest conversation, be very clear about what you're individually responsible for, where there's a shared responsibility, and perhaps also think about, is there a form of words or a signal that you can use, that you can agree to sort of say, actually, you're kind of stepping on my toes a little bit now. And sometimes these things are best done with humour, good humour, and you can deliver difficult messages and have difficult conversations by being kind of gracious and good humoured about it. So, but yeah, you have to have that conversation about expectations setting and clear kind of roles and responsibilities, and maybe what's your kind of flag that you agree for if your toes are being stepped on, as I say. So that brings us pretty close to the end of our 30 minutes together, and I guess my overall challenge to the audience on this webinar, and indeed anyone watching the recording subsequently, is that it's not about big, bold kind of projects. It's all about taking small kind of steps. So if you think about the 5 tips that I presented, are there perhaps 1 or 2 that might make an impact for you personally? Is there something you can do tomorrow just to begin that kind of journey to assert your value as a marketing leader? So I'm conscious of time, and this is my sort of 1-slide sell to you, for which I apologise. But Claire tells me I've got to promote. So some of the stuff that we do as a business and projects we've become involved in, we work with marketing leaders in a coaching capacity. We also do mentoring for their teams. We also deliver or facilitate either strategic marketing planning or brand plan sessions. That's something that I personally love doing. And again, we can make sure, working with a client company, that we get as strong a plans as possible that enhance the value, the perceived value that marketers are delivering. And then we also work with marketing teams on effectiveness, whether that's kind of the softer stuff like culture, ways of working, behaviours, or the kind of harder stuff around marketing processes, innovation processes, things that help improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the business. Those 3 areas are things where we may be able to help you to enhance the value of marketing within your company. So I just want to close by talking you through what kind of happens next. We're going to send out a follow-up email after this webinar, just with a 2-minute evaluation. As I said, this is a total experiment, so we are open to any and all feedback that you have. That evaluation will come out later today, and then tomorrow we'll send out a copy of the webinar slides and a link to the recording of this webinar. So if you're so inclined, you can watch it again, and also details for the upcoming webinars. If you do want to get in touch and have a sort of a bit of a discovery chat to see if there might be opportunities for us to work together, then feel free to get in touch. The contact details will be on the emails which we send out to you. So in the meantime, thank you very, very much for joining. I appreciate marketers are hugely busy people, so thank you for the half an hour. I hope you found something in the content which will be useful and valuable to you going forward. So Claire, unless there's anything else that we want to tackle, I can close it there.
Finish with questions unless anyone has any last things to write in.
No, it doesn't look like it. Brilliant. Well, you'll be pleased to know that the argument outside the window has now ended. So peace has been restored. But thank you guys for your time. Very much appreciated, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.